son, brother, former refugee, humanitarian, 2021 Washingtonian of the Year, Georgetown graduate, nonprofit founder, TED Fellow. Any of these attributes might apply to several Tillman Scholars in this room, but there's one person here today that identifies with all of them. When we met Safi virtually for his Tillman Scholar interview, he was a naval reservist that had been mobilized to the Javits Center in New York City. So if we're thinking about the year, this was 2020. So this was New York in the height of the pandemic. It was immediately clear that he had a passion for medicine, and he was a tenacious leader, and he had an even deeper care for his brothers and sisters in Afghanistan. Bottom line, he had heart, and that's what we were looking for. When he was accepted to the program, this was the quote that he submitted to the foundation for inclusion on our website, and I wanted to share it with you all. The energy and passion for pursuing challenging goals derive from the prospect of making a positive change in the lives of people who are forgotten and need the most help. Right there, we had confirmation that he was going to do something big, but I don't think we realized just how big until now. It is my great honor to introduce a video that is going to further introduce you to my dear friend, 2020 Tillman Scholar, Safi Rauf.
It's 8:15 p.m. in Afghanistan right now. And at this time, 10 days ago, I was sitting in an 8-foot by 8-foot cell in the basement of a maximum security prison in Kabul where I was being held captive by the Taliban. I'd been in that cell for 104 days, and yet I was one of the lucky ones. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to the beginning. This is me. I'm 5 years old and living in an Afghan refugee camp in Peshawar, Pakistan. You can see the two patches on my UNHCR donated jeans. One patch is an American flag, and the other is the Statue of Liberty, the quintessential beacons of the American dream I so badly wanted. But as a refugee, I didn't have a state to call home. And not having a state, I didn't have rights. And not having rights, I didn't have a voice. I needed someone to advocate for me. And I was fortunate to have two advocates. My parents, who had immigrated to the US 4 years ahead of me, fought tirelessly to get me to America for those 4 years. They gave me a voice, they gave me the American dream. And my parents' advocacy allowed me to join them, to immigrate to Omaha, Nebraska, to go to high school in the state, to serve in the military, to graduate as a Tillman Scholar from Georgetown University, and to get accepted into medical school. I became the American dream. And in my dream, everything came full circle. This past summer, I deferred one dream for another when I put medical school on hold, founded Human First Coalition, an organization dedicated to aiding Afghans in need. Having spent the first 17 years of my life stateless, I rather abruptly found myself in the role of the humanitarian aid worker who had shaped so much of my life. I became that advocate and that voice for others. In becoming an aid worker, I got to provide food, medical care, and shelter for thousands of Afghans. I got to operate resettlement flights for thousands more, and I got to make multiple trips to Kabul with the Taliban's blessing to oversee it all. But then on December 18, 2021, everything changed. That morning, which started off like any other morning, I was suddenly, inexplicably, and unexpectedly taken into Taliban custody. As I was being driven to the Taliban's General Directorate of Intelligence headquarters, I was told that I just needed to answer a few routine questions, and then I'd be sent back to my hotel. Instead, a few hours later, I was brought into that basement room, 3 roommates, no blanket, no mattress, no pillow, no sun, no way to communicate with the outside world, and no clue what was to become of me. And from that moment on, I stayed in that basement in the dead of the Afghan winter for 105 days. The entire time, I feared that I might be taken in front of a firing squad at any minute, And on 45th day, I was beaten and tortured by 11 men wielding pipes after 8 days on hunger strike. I had done nothing wrong. But again, I was lucky. I not only had several exceptional advocates, but I had a state. The US government gave me a voice and asserted my human rights, and that voice ultimately led to my release 10 days ago. And on the day of my release, following a 4-hour flight from Kabul to Qatar, the euphoria I felt as I walked off that plane is indescribable. But amidst the triumph and joy of homecoming, something was amiss. On the day of my release, I returned to society to find that humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan was only getting worse. The whole world was fixated on Ukraine, and nearly every Afghan resettlement effort was on pause or had grounded to a screeching halt with no effective resolution in sight. And that was a huge letdown. And that is why I decided that before even visiting my family, I had to get back to work. Because the truth of the matter is 95% of Afghans are currently not getting enough to eat, 22.8 million are facing crisis levels of hunger, 97% are living below the poverty line, and 9 million are living in extreme poverty. And these are the individuals who fought alongside us and the international coalition for the last 20 years. They are our allies, they are our brothers and sisters, and they are in desperate straits. The magnitude of the work ahead is staggering. But we have to start somewhere. And the question becomes, what should we do? In my mind, 4 things. First, we must bolster humanitarian aid provisions for the international community by increasing support for and donations to grassroots organizations that have infrastructure to ensure that aid is getting directly into the hands of the people who need it the most. And that's just not my organization. There are so many support-worthy groups doing exceptional work in Afghanistan, and we need resources now. Second, we government and citizens of the 36 countries who fought in Afghanistan must keep our promises to our Afghan allies to whom we owe a debt by fast-tracking their resettlement, be it in the United States or elsewhere. This first and foremost necessitates resettling refugees who are currently waiting in camps around the world to reach a place that they can call home. It also calls upon the international community to increase quotas for Afghan allies to accept more at-risk Afghans for permanent resettlement and to expand programs like humanitarian parole to generate more pathways for those in need. Third, as we find pathways forward for these individuals, we must not separate families. We must preserve them. Or at the very least, create strict limits for the amount of time that families can be separated from. Family separation like mine generate irreparable harm. But clear and specific change to existing admission policies can ensure that other minors do not face the same fate that befell me and my family. Fourth, and this is the most important of them all, we must reestablish an international diplomatic presence in Afghanistan to hold Taliban accountable for their actions and provide consular services to the people. It opens channel to address Taliban's actions rather than cutting off, isolating, and eliminating avenues for influence. And I've witnessed what engagement with the Taliban can look like firsthand. The negotiations that resulted in my release from captivities were the direct result of effective diplomacy with the Taliban on the world stage. Diplomats spoke to each other openly and resolved an issue of mutual concern. And while the success of this discussion is perhaps an anomaly, the kind of diplomacy demonstrated by my release can and should serve as a model for achieving other desired change for the future of Afghanistan, such as the restoration of girls' education, above grade 6 freedom of press, bolstering women's rights, and most urgently, increasing humanitarian assistance. At the same time, our diplomacy can't be a blank check. The Taliban must live up to their end of the bargain to demonstrate that they are ready to engage in diplomacy as an actor that upholds basic human rights, that ensure necessary freedoms, and that does not take or hold hostages. At the end of the day, the situation in Afghanistan is an extremely complex one. It can't be summed up in an 8-minute talk I wrote 4 days ago, Emerging from Captivity. Yet there are tangible solutions, and I'm in the privileged position of being able to advocate for them, but I am here today to tell you that you are too. The truth of the matter is, especially in the case of Afghanistan, change has always and will continue to start with everyday people. This fall, tens of thousands of people from around the world banded together at the grassroots level to aid Afghans in need. You don't need to be an expert to engage, to volunteer, to contribute, to lobby, or to even simply welcome a refugee to advocate for them. As Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. On the afternoon of my release 10 days ago, I, at long last, climbed out of my basement cell and into the sunlight without anything binding my hands or covering my eyes. I could see the sky. I traveled out of the prison through Kabul City in Corolla sedan. I passed the American Embassy and arrived at Kabul International Airport. I walked onto the tarmac. I climbed into the C-17. I shook hands with American, Qatari, and British diplomats. And suddenly, I was a free man again. But again, I was one of the lucky ones. Ultimately, being a captive reminded me of a time when I was helpless and needed a voice. Now that I'm released, I have my voice back, and mercifully, it puts me in a position where I can advocate for that little boy with the Statue of Liberty patch on his UNHCR-donated jeans, chasing the American dream. I hope you'll join me. When we joined the military, we all had our own unique reasons. Some of us joined for their patriotic duty to this country. Others joined to follow their heroes and their mentors. Some joined because their recruiter enticed them into it. Others joined because they had a family, had children, and needed medical benefits. But once they put on that uniform, stood shoulder with shoulder with their brothers and sisters, their only mission in their life became to defend this country and protect their brothers and sisters in arms at the risk of their own lives. In the last 20 years, that commitment manifested for many of us as we deployed to Afghanistan again and again and served alongside our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan. They became our allies, they became our brothers and sisters, and it became our obligation and our duty to defend and protect them. Almost a year ago, on August 15, Afghanistan was taken over by the Taliban. And all of our allies, our brothers and sisters in Afghanistan, faced certain death. We couldn't sit around and watch them get executed one by one and do nothing. And as expected, my fellow Americans, veterans, active duty military members, civilians, public servants, they rose to the occasion. Thousands of them came together and started helping our Afghan allies. As an Afghan American, I was full of pride, joy, and awe for all of those people. Fortunately, I was in a position to lead a lot of those efforts. To lead those efforts, I made several trips to Afghanistan to oversee all of that work get done. During that time, I was repeatedly promised that I'll be safe in Afghanistan by the very people who took me captive. I had letters, promises,
everything. They had promised the international community that they will not harm any Americans. They will not harm anyone from the previous government. It was all a lie. On that day, December 18, when I was taken captive, it was a huge letdown. It was a disappointment beyond explanation. I was held in that basement for 105 days in the dead of winter without a mattress, blanket, pillow, or access to the outside world. As I was dealing with all the difficulties of that basement and that prison, I saw so many of our allies also brought into that prison. And later, according to a New York Times article, about 5,000 of them were executed. And that's a very conservative number. I was the fortunate one. I had a country who advocated for me, and finally, I was released and came back to my country here in America with my fellow Americans and my friends. It was apparent right away that the efforts that we were doing to evacuate all of our Afghan allies had halted, and the new story was Ukraine. And that's why, before going to Nebraska to see my family, I flew straight from Doha to Washington, D.C., and started knocking on every door I could find. And because of that, we were able to restart our efforts, restart our work in Afghanistan, restart our evacuation flights, restart evacuating our allies. Now it's almost a year that since Taliban has taken over Afghanistan. They have gone back on every promise they made in the Doha Agreement. They have taken all the rights from women. They don't allow children to go to school. They don't allow girls to go to school. They have sent all women home who had jobs, who had a life, who were providing for their families. As I am helping these Afghans, you can too. Today, I'm here to invite you for two things. One, contact Human First Coalition, contact me, my team, and explore how you can help. Just like after August 15, ordinary citizens, ordinary people came together and helped Afghans in plight. You can once again. Second, when many of the Afghans left Afghanistan and are currently living in exile, it was not only the people that left Afghanistan, the culture of Afghanistan also left. The culture of Afghanistan is also living in exile. It's living. For it to thrive, we must promote it. To that end, we're holding a cultural gala in New York on August 15. It is to celebrate the culture of Afghanistan in defiance of the Taliban and to show the world the beautiful people of Afghanistan, the beautiful culture of Afghanistan. On August 15, join me in New York City at the Metropolitan Pavilion. You can go to our website, Human First Coalition, and learn more and how to join us. At the end of the day, it feels like everything is crumbling down. We all have to deal with so much of our everyday lives. We're dealing with the trauma of the last year. We're dealing with the trauma of August 15. We're dealing with the trauma of captivity. But we cannot give up. We have to, we must raise and we must help the Afghan allies. We must give them the promise that we did 20 years ago. We promised them that if they support the American ideals, if they support democracy, if they stand shoulder to shoulder with us, our brothers and sisters in arms, we will fulfill our promise to them. Our promise to them was that we will give a life to their children, we will give a life to their family, we will give a life to them. They can live under democracy, they can live in this country. They can also have the American dream. Please join me in the mission of Human First and help our Afghan allies. I'm here, and if you have any questions, I'm open book. And even though I've been through Taliban captivity, it hasn't changed me at all. So, any questions you may have?
Rick Schumacher, 2010. What kind of resources is Human First getting into Afghanistan monetarily? I mean, what exactly are you getting done in addition to, or I mean, if there's another mission on top of getting people on the planes?
So our humanitarian aid mission and providing shelter to people who have lost their homes, especially on June 22nd, there was a large earthquake in Paktika province of Afghanistan. About 1,000 people died. The morning of that tragedy, Human First was in Paktika on the scene and providing humanitarian aid. We provided medical clinics. We have remote medical clinics. One of the major need was female doctors. A woman who had broken bones and was under rubble, the Taliban will not allow male doctors to touch her. She had broken bones. She was in pain. She was suffering. But the Taliban would not allow male doctors to touch her. To that end, we're able to establish a health clinic that has female doctors. Female doctors are treating those women. They're not only treating those women, but they're also becoming their allies. They're becoming their confidants. They're becoming their friends. They're going out there to those clinics and they're talking to those women. Those little girls are going and they're talking to those doctors and they're learning. So it's not only healthcare that those women and those girls are getting, it's also hope that those girls who are living in the remote villages of Afghanistan can one day go to the big city and also pursue those same goals. In addition to that, we're also providing clean water. As I was speaking before coming onto this stage, I was on the phone with one of our partners in Texas. They're sending about 200 water purification kits that's going to Dubai and are going to reach to Afghanistan that will serve about 400 families. So that's the type of work we're doing in Afghanistan. In addition to that, we're also providing shelters for some of the families in Kabul. We're providing medical help. After August 15, there were about 16 children that were born in our care. So that answers your question.
Safi, hi, Erhan Bedestani. Safi, Erhan Bedestani, I'm 22, Tillman Scholar. First and foremost, amazing story, and really the American dream come true listening to your story. So thank you very much for sharing that. I had the opportunity to work a little bit at our university's immigration clinic this winter and fall. And just want to know, is your organization also advocating for a permanent solution for the Afghans that are here? Though the current administration tried to call it a success to give them TPS, which is temporary protected status, that basically means that Afghans that are here are not U.S. citizens, nor is there a pathway to make them U.S. citizens. Advocacy, unfortunately, is best done by American citizens seeking to help other American citizens. It's very tough to be disenfranchised to some extent where you're in TPS status and never have U.S. citizenship. So we're creating a coalition of Afghans in America that are sub-optimized, if you will, with the current condition of having TPS. So I was wondering, are you guys working on that as well?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very important point you brought. Right before coming to the Tillman Leadership Summit, I had a meeting with about 8 Congress members, and we talked exactly about that. There is a bill, Afghan Adjustment Act, that's in the House right now, and previously by the administration it was put as a part of the Ukraine bill, and it passed through the House, and when it went to Senate, it was killed by Grassley from Iowa. Senator Grassley from Iowa. He basically shut it down, and he's our biggest opponent right now in the Senate for the Afghan Adjustment Act. To give a little bit of background information about that, during the NEO evacuation from Kabul, about 75,000 Afghans were evacuated, and they're currently living in the United States. However, they only have 2 years of protection to stay here. After 2 years, they don't have any protection. And once at the 1 year mark of their arrival into the United States under that status, they have to apply for a permanent status. Now, to apply for that permanent status, they have to hire a lawyer. There's not enough lawyers in the United States to take all those cases. One. Second, nobody has the money to hire those lawyers. All those Afghans that came to America and are here right now without a status, they don't have jobs, they can't work. And even if they have jobs, those jobs don't pay enough to hire lawyers. So those Afghans are in a limbo right now, and the Afghan Adjustment Act is the only way for them to get a status in the United States. And there is precedent in the history of the United States for decades ago. Every time the US has evacuated a large number of people and brought them to the United States, after every war that we have ended, the Congress has passed a bill that adjusted their status. It gave them a legal status to stay in the United States. Now, ironically, a lot of the opposition is that they're claiming security reasons. Ironically, this bill actually takes measures that will make sure that all those Afghans go through an interview process that will confirm that they're not a security threat. And it's ironic that those people are staying here in the United States right now without that security interview, while we are saying pass this bill so that they can be interviewed so they're not a security threat. So it's kind of a backwards argument at this moment. The only person who is killing this right now is Chuck Grassley from Iowa. And in the past, he has a track record of being against any immigration bill. He was against the SIV program this whole time. And every time he was against the SIV program, a bunch of veterans convinced him to sit down and not oppose it. He never supported it, but he took away his opposition. So I think we're all veterans, and I think we can once again help with that a lot, especially with Chuck Grassley.
Safi, thanks for that. I was trying to throw that kind of up for you to slam dunk it, and you did. And then the second thing, which was one of the 4 points that you brought up, and this may be a little bit controversial, but I served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I don't like to lose, and I don't like to shake the hand of an enemy. But if it means preserving the welfare of those that are there, I agree wholeheartedly with you about the idea of reestablishing a diplomatic presence by the U.S. in Afghanistan, because to not do so is to perpetuate human suffering and conflict, for which I think everybody in this room agrees is the worser of 2 options. Thank you.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. It's a reality that we cannot deny that Taliban are in Afghanistan right now. And to leave them in a vacuum, we're giving them the opportunity to do whatever they please. Commit all the genocides they want to commit, and we won't have a way of holding them accountable. Lynn O'Donnell, one of the Australian journalists recently, was taken by the Taliban intelligence services, the same agency that took me hostage, and was forced to write a tweet that was false and then kicked out of Afghanistan. So any journalists that are going to Afghanistan right now, anything that they're reporting, it's not correct. It's all false. They're showing a rosy picture of Afghanistan, and if not rosy, a much more moderate picture of Afghanistan than what is actually happening in Afghanistan. Anyone who tries to show the real picture of Afghanistan, they're being arrested, being detained, harassed, and kicked out of Afghanistan. So to have a presence, a diplomatic presence in Afghanistan for any of the European countries or the European coalition or NATO to have a small presence there, that would ensure that Taliban don't commit those war crimes.
Thank you so much for coming here and speaking with us today. Chelsea Romero, 2022 Tillman Scholar. I'm currently a third-year medical student at the largest medical center in the world. I will myself be a female doctor here in a few years. I know a lot of other female doctors. If you need people to come and help in Afghanistan and give medical care to these women, there's a lot of people I can go and talk to.
Thank you so much. I wouldn't want anything more than to, send doctors to Afghanistan, and a lot of people are offering and are trying to do that, but in a situation that we have in Afghanistan right now, it's incredibly volatile. We have to also, by providing humanitarian aid, we also have to keep in mind that the security of our staff is our topmost priority. And in these conditions, sending somebody, American citizens especially, to go work in Afghanistan is careless. I went to Afghanistan and I had all the protections I needed, and I was taken a hostage. If they are taking journalists hostage, they will take anybody. And right now there is, some of this information is very sensitive, but I'm also helping with a lot of the American citizens that are still held in Afghanistan. And there are some that are still in Taliban captivity in Afghanistan. And they're American citizens. They are taxpayers. They're the people who put all these politicians in their position that they are. So I hope that answers your question. But I will definitely be, we can certainly have some creative solutions around that.